It was 11:47 p.m. when Senator John Kennedy stood outside a nameless high-rise in Los Angeles, clutching a sleek black envelope with no return address, and one line stamped in silver, "The Circle of Truth attendance required." He hadn't planned to be there. No aides, no press, no briefings, just a handwritten note slipped under his hotel door and a number to text. Against his better judgment, curiosity won. He pressed the buzzer. The elevator opened without a sound. No one inside, no buttons, just a gentle hum, like the sound of air before a storm. When the doors reopened, he found himself in a penthouse, draped in velvet black, smelling of citrus and something older like dusted leather or forgotten promises. And standing there, alone, under a glass chandelier, was Bill Maher. "Glad you came," Maher said, his smile too measured to be warm. "Most people who get the envelope don't say no." John chuckled awkwardly. "I figured this was a pitch or a roast, not whatever this is." "Oh, it's much more than that," Maher whispered, motioning toward a small table in the center of the room. On it lay a crystal orb, softly glowing from within. Around it, a ring of empty chairs. "We call this the circle," he said, "but that's just branding. You're here for something bigger." John hesitated, scanning the room for cameras, microphones, anything. There were none. No staff, no catering, no wine, just silence. Maher leaned in. "You've done well for yourself, John, but influence has ceilings. This?" He tapped the orb gently. "This is where ceilings disappear, but only if you're ready to let go of the script you think you're writing." The air grew heavier, like the walls were watching. A chill ran down John's spine. Still, he sat down. "You'll be asked one thing tonight," Maher said. "Will you speak into it?" "Into what? The orb?" Maher nodded. "That's the first step. Your truth, spoken aloud, without filter. No context, no lawyers, no camera angles, just us. And the ones who listen?" The phrase hit John like a cold slap. "The ones who listen?" Maher must have noticed the change in his face. "You think people rise in this country because they're good at what they do? You think late-night hosts, billionaires, political legends, they just got lucky? They spoke first. Then they were heard." John stood up slowly. "And what if I don't?" Maher's eyes narrowed, but his tone stayed calm. "Then you'll vanish. Not overnight. Not loudly, but piece by piece. Podcast invites disappear. Old friends don't return your calls. Book deals get shelved, not because you're bad, just because you don't exist in the narrative anymore." John paused. A lifetime of public service, built on hard-earned respect and unflinching honesty, all reduced to a whispered threat wrapped in metaphor. He looked at the orb. It pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat. Something in him wanted to know. Just touch it. Just say one line. Just lean forward and whisper. But something deeper said no. And it was at that very moment, right when the silence in the room felt like it might crush every breath in his lungs, that you, yes, you watching this need to stop and ask yourself a question. Would you speak into it? Would you trade your voice for visibility, your soul for status? If this moment gave you chills, if you felt what John felt, then hit that like button and comment the number 9 right now. That tells us you're still awake, still thinking, still listening. Because John didn't speak into the orb. He simply whispered, "I don't belong here," turned his back, and walked away. Maher didn't stop him. He didn't need to. The real game didn't start in that room. It started the moment John Kennedy left it. The next morning, everything felt off. Senator John Kennedy woke to the sunlight pouring through his hotel window, but something in the air felt like a storm that had passed without thunder. His phone, normally buzzing with morning updates, was eerily still. No text from staff, no alerts, no news digests, just a black screen waiting to be tapped. He reached for it, unlocked it, and saw what looked like a glitch. His podcast platform account was no longer verified. His last scheduled episode had vanished. And on his calendar, the nationally televised interview he'd confirmed just 2 days ago was now labeled canceled by host. He thought it was a mistake. He called his assistant. No answer. Called the producer of the show. Straight to voicemail. It was too quiet, too fast. That's when the hotel concierge knocked and handed him a package. No signature required. No return address. Just a white box with a single card inside. It read, "Version 1 has been removed. The narrative resumes without deviation. Inside the box was a blank audio recorder and a gold pen. That evening, driven more by curiosity than fear, John met a longtime journalist friend at a small, private bar in the hills, someone he trusted, someone who'd covered him for decades. They exchanged pleasantries, tried to talk baseball, bourbon, anything normal. But the tension was thick. Finally, the journalist leaned in and asked, "You went to the circle, didn't you?" John didn't answer. "I heard about the orb," the journalist whispered. "The silence, the folders. You were supposed to speak. They say when you do, they write you in. When you don't, they start writing you out." John tried to laugh, but his voice cracked. "You're telling me I'm being deleted?" "No," the journalist said. "You're being overwritten." That night, things escalated. His credit card was declined at a restaurant, not flagged, declined. His personal email was flooded with unsubscribed notifications from mailing lists he never joined. A fan forum dedicated to his speeches had been taken down for violation of community guidelines. Even his Wikipedia page was altered, reduced to 2 sentences and tagged as non-notable figure. It was a slow dismantling of a life built in public view. But the breaking point came 3 days later. He received a call at 3:17 a.m. No caller ID, just silence. He almost hung up until a voice finally whispered, "You've left the script." John froze. "We'll give you one more chance," the voice said. "Come back, speak once, and this disappears. No one has to know." Before he could respond, the line went dead. At dawn, he drove to an overlook he used to visit during campaigns, staring out at the city. For the first time in years, no one cared where he was. No paparazzi, no security detail, no interviews. He was already halfway gone. He remembered what Bill Maher had said, that influence had ceilings, and that those who passed the test didn't need cameras because the real power was invisible. It didn't need followers, it had loyalty. And if you didn't show loyalty, you didn't exist. He didn't know what disturbed him more, that it might be true, or that he hadn't seen it coming. But somewhere deep in his chest, he felt something stronger than fear: defiance. A line from an old speech came to mind. "In the face of silence, speak louder. In the face of erasure, write your name in fire." That night, he recorded a message enough for them, but for anyone still listening. A quiet podcast episode. No music, no sponsors, just his voice. He titled it "The Room with No Echo." Within hours, the upload failed. Repeatedly. By the next day, his entire podcast channel had been permanently suspended for breach of unspecified community terms. The silence was no longer just strategic. It was weaponized. And as he sat at his desk, his inbox emptied, his contacts evaporating, he realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about him. It never was. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, just when Senator John Kennedy thought things couldn't get any stranger. He was sitting in his home office, surrounded by unplugged electronics and handwritten notes, when a knock echoed through the front door, 3 slow, deliberate taps. No one used that door. No one knew his new address, not even most of his former staff. He approached cautiously, expecting a delivery or a stranger asking for directions. Instead, he found a small envelope taped to the door. No name. Just a phrase etched in gold foil: "You've been granted access to the vault." He stood there, staring at it, his breath shallow. That name, the vault had heard it whispered at the circle. No one explained it, but the way people reacted to the word told him it wasn't metaphorical. It was real. And now, it had found him. Inside the envelope was a single card with coordinates and a time. 10 p.m., no devices, come alone. For a moment, he considered burning it. But part of him needed to know, needed to see what they were protecting. What could possibly be so valuable that careers, lives, and legacies were being built or destroyed based on a whispered word? At exactly 10 p.m., John parked outside what appeared to be a corporate storage facility tucked behind a line of industrial buildings near Beverly Hills. A plain metal door opened on its own as he approached, as if he had already been verified. Inside, it was dim, clinical, and nearly soundless except for the faint hum of what sounded like servers. Maybe air filtration, maybe breathing. A woman in a navy suit greeted him without a word and gestured toward a narrow hallway. She didn't ask for ID, didn't check anything. She simply walked. He followed. They reached an elevator with no floor buttons, just a keycard slot. She inserted hers. The elevator descended silently. When the doors opened, John stepped into what he could only describe as a psychological cold chamber. Rows of drawers, stretching from floor to ceiling, each labeled with a single letter and a number. A massive index, each one locked. In the center of the room stood a man he hadn't expected to see, again Bill Maher. He looked older, not in the physical sense, but in the weight behind his eyes. He wasn't smiling this time, no charm, just a tired sort of authority. "You're here because we didn't delete you," Maher said quietly. "We archived you." John narrowed his eyes. "What is this place?" Maher gestured toward the drawers. "Insurance. Every name in here has leverage. Some gave it willingly. Others, we found it for them." John stepped closer to a drawer labeled K11. His fingers hovered over the lock. Maher shook his head. "Don't. You open that, and we both disappear." A silence settled between them. "You still think this is about fame," Maher continued. "It's not. It's about relevance. That's the currency. And relevance requires control. What people see, hear, believe, that control lives here." John's voice was cold. "This is blackmail." Maher didn't flinch. "It's balance." Then he took out a new folder and slid it across the table. On it was John's name. It was thinner than most. Inside were documents, a media contract offer, a podcast revival, even a best-selling book deleach with a blank line at the bottom labeled Acknowledgement of Alignment. "You don't even have to speak," Maher said. "Just show up. Sit at the table. We'll do the rest. Your name will be trending by morning." John looked at the papers, then at Maher, then at the endless drawers. It wasn't just a vault of secrets. It was a machine that built legacies and buried the ones who declined. But the worst part wasn't the manipulation. It was how clean it all was. No threats, no raised voices, just options. Like it was all a choice. And maybe, in a way, it was. John pushed the folder back. Maher blinked. "You sure?" He nodded once. "I'd rather vanish than be remembered for sitting silently in your circle." Maher's lips twitched something between a smirk and a twitch of regret. "Then the drawer stays empty, but don't say we didn't give you the option." As the elevator rose again in silence, John didn't feel victorious. He felt cold, like he'd just escaped something vast, invisible, and terrifying. But as the doors opened and the cool air hit his face, he whispered to himself one simple truth. They didn't own his name yet, and now he would make sure they never would. The backlash didn't come with flames. It came with silence, so complete it felt like gravity had shifted. By the time Senator John Kennedy woke the next morning, the world had already begun rewriting itself without him in it. Headlines that would have once mentioned his policies or podcast now skipped his name entirely. A magazine that had promised him a feature piece simply replaced the entire issue with a double cover celebrating two rising stars he had never heard of. One of them, oddly enough, bore striking similarities to John himself. The way he spoke, his southern cadence, even some of the same stories John had once told on air now repackaged under someone else's voice. John sat in his living room, watching a rerun of a debate he had participated in just weeks ago. But something was wrong. The edit was different. His closing argument gone. Entire sections where his voice once anchored the room were trimmed, dissolved like fog. He wasn't censored. He was ghosted. It was more than erasure. It was strategic omission. He reached out to an old friend in Media Somion he'd trusted for over 20 years. When she finally picked up, her voice was clipped, almost robotic. "John, I can't talk right now. Please don't call this number again." Click. No anger, no explanation, just a door slammed shut with no handle on his side. Then came the second message. It wasn't a call. It wasn't even a text. It was a handwritten note slipped under his windshield wiper in the parking garage of a grocery store. The same gold-inked handwriting he recognized from the invitation to the circle. It read, "Legacy is not just what you leave behind. It's who's allowed to remember you." There was no signature, just a watermark in the corner, a faint circle with an eye inside it. By that evening, things had escalated. A journalist from a major outlet called him in secret, using a burner phone. Her voice was panicked, strained. "John, I tried to pitch your story," she whispered, "but the moment I said your name, the room went quiet." One of the editors pulled me aside and said, "He's not in rotation anymore. I don't know what that means, but they told me if I pushed it, I'd be reassigned." He thanked her, even though the words felt hollow. He could hear the fear behind her professionalism. People weren't just scared to support him. They were scared to say his name out loud. That night, John received another call at 3:17 a.m. Same silence, same breath, but this time, a new voice female, soft and calm, spoke a single line. The vault doesn't forgive disobedience, only obedience. Then the line went dead. By now, John was used to the fear. But this was something else. He realized the vault wasn't just about protecting secrets. It was about rewriting reality. Who gets remembered? Who gets reshaped? And who gets replaced? And the scariest part? No one would ever know it happened, unless he made sure they did. He decided to go public not with a tweet, not with a press conference. Those would be intercepted, redirected, buried. Instead, he showed up uninvited. There was a charity gala being held at the Beverly Grandin event, packed with media elites, celebrities, influencers, and studio executives. He had spoken at this event in past years. Now, he was just a man in a black suit, walking alone through the doors. No one recognized him at first. He moved past the red carpet, through the crowd, until he reached the open bar. He stood there, quietly, listening. A producer he once worked with was chatting with an actress he'd helped cast in her breakout role. Their laughter stopped when they saw him. The actress stepped forward, hesitant. Then she leaned in close and whispered something he would never forget. "You didn't speak into the orb, did you?" He shook his head. She gave the faintest smile, and then just like that turned and walked away. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity, like she had said too much, just by acknowledging his presence. He realized at that moment he wasn't the only one who had said no, but he might be the only one willing to stay in the light long enough to tell the world why. As the night wore on, he felt eyes watching, not fans, not reporters, observers, measuring him, calculating how long he could last before even the memory of him began to dissolve. John Kennedy raised his glass, not to toast, but to mark a beginning, because if the system was built on silence, then his greatest weapon would be his voice. Even if no one dared to listen, the leak shattered everything. It started as a flickering, unlisted video dropped anonymously on a forgotten corner of the internet. The quality was grainy, the audio warped, but what it captured was unmistakable. A circular room, the orb, and figures blurred but recognizable whispering into it one by one. Their faces dimly lit, but their voices chillingly clear. No scripts, no context, just eerie affirmations and cryptic pledges. I accept the shape of the story. Let the truth be redefined. And erase what must be erased. And then, the unmistakable voice of Bill Maher. The internet didn't just react, it exploded. Reddit threads with thousands of upvotes dissected every second of the footage. Twitter hashtags trended worldwide. Number The Orb Room, number Scripted Souls, number Mars Circle. TikTok creators made side-by-side videos comparing known celebrity speeches to phrases heard in the video, exposing uncanny similarities. People whispered about the vault, about media manipulation, about a hidden system controlling fame and narrative. But the real chaos began when a group of online sleuths connected the location in the video to a private compound in the Santa Monica Hills, just miles from the Circle's original meeting spot. Then came a second leak this time, screenshots from inside the vault, rows of folders, labels, names. Names the world knew. Bill Maher, once untouchable on late-night television, was cornered. A live broadcast of his show was interrupted when protesters projected the orb image across the studio wall. "Who's writing your truth?" it said in glowing letters. His monologue stumbled. For the first time in decades, his timing cracked. His smug cadence faltered. He stuttered, and millions watched as he reached for his water, only to realize the glass was already shaking in his hand. By morning, 3 of his major sponsors had issued statements, reviewing our partnership, not aligned with our brand values. One issued an apology. Another simply deleted their entire campaign history with his show. Then came the apology, not from Maher but from one of his producers, who resigned and posted a cryptic thread on Twitter. "I didn't know what the orb was at first. We were told it was symbolic, but when I saw the tapes, I couldn't stay." The house of cards had begun to collapse. Quietly, unstoppably. But while the world focused on Maher's unraveling, Senator John Kennedy watched from a distant scene with satisfaction, but with a strange, hollow stillness. He knew this wasn't over. He hadn't leaked the video, Someone else had. Someone inside. And whoever it was, they had risked everything. One evening, as the scandal reached its peak, a letter arrived in John's mailbox. No return address. Just a handwritten note. You weren't alone. You were just first. There was no signature. That same night, he received a call not blocked, not anonymous. A well-known journalist with a reputation for staying far away from conspiracy offered him a chance to speak. National television. No script. No cuts. John hesitated. He knew what came with being visible again, but he also knew something had shifted. The people weren't just curious, they were angry. They wanted truth. Not the kind written into a teleprompter, but the raw kind. The human kind. He agreed. The interview was tense, gripping. Millions watched. At one point, the host leaned forward and asked, "Senator Kennedy, do you believe the system we've trusted to inform us is compromised?" John looked straight into the camera and said, "It's not just compromised, it's curated. And the ones doing the curating aren't accountable to anyone you've ever voted for, or listened to, or followed. They exist behind the curtain, but the moment we stop whispering and start pointing, they panic." The clip went viral in under an hour. And then came the twist. At 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. Not a call. A video. It was footage from inside the vault. A single drawer, slowly sliding open. Inside, a folder labeled JK. Someone was trying to warn him, or threaten him. Maybe both. But John didn't flinch. He posted the video online with a caption, "You had your chance to own my story. Now the world does." And the floodgates opened. People started sharing their own stories. Journalists, podcasters, writers, even actors, those who had walked away, stayed silent or vanished without a trace. The narrative had broken. The truth was loose. For the first time in a long time, John Kennedy didn't feel erased. He felt heard. It was dawn when Senator John Kennedy stepped outside, barefoot on cold stone, as the first rays of sunlight cracked through the trees. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel like it was watching him. There was no envelope on his windshield, no static calls, just quiet, real quiet. His interview had gone further than anyone expected. Not just viral, transformational. Students were quoting him on campus walls. Journalists who had once ghosted him now reposted his words with admiration. But more than that, something deeper had shifted. People had started asking questions again. Real questions. He wasn't a hero. He hadn't exposed classified files or torn down a regime. He had done something smaller, but maybe braver. He had said no and refused to be silenced. The vault, the circle, the rituals, they were never just about control. They were about compliance. Who will go along? Who will bow their head, say the right things, speak into the glowing orb, and disappear into a carefully edited version of themselves? And who would risk it all to stay real? But Bill Maher had become the cautionary tale. Once sharp, untouchable, wielding words like weapons, now a ghost of his former self. His sponsors were gone, his audience fragmented. The once proud face of media cynicism now found himself trending not for wit, but for weakness. Footage of his panic had become a meme, his silence now louder than any monologue he'd ever delivered. And the vault? Gone, or at least vanished from public record. The building had been emptied overnight, all footage scrubbed. The circle dissolved like smoke, but not from strength, from fear, because they didn't expect someone like John to survive. They didn't expect anyone to walk away from the table and still have a voice. But here he was. A few days later, John gave one last speech. Not in a courtroom, not on a podcast, not even on television. It was at a high school gym in a small town where no one wore makeup for the camera, where folding chairs creaked and the mic buzzed twice before working. He didn't read from notes. He didn't bring security. He just stood before a crowd of kids and said this. Someone once told me that legacy is what others remember about you. I disagree. Legacy is what you remember about yourself when no one else is watching, when the cameras are off, when the deal is on the table, when the room is dark and someone asks you to give up just a piece of who you are for something shiny. That moment, that's who you are. And that's what they'll never understand, those who run the silence. The student sat breathless. And then he said something no one forgot. I'd rather fade out in honesty than burn forever in someone else's script. After the speech, one young girl approached him. She looked nervous but determined. She held out a crumpled notebook with a question scribbled in thick blue ink. It read, "How do you know when it's right to walk away?" John smiled, took the pen from her hand, and wrote beneath it, "When staying means becoming a lie." That line circled the internet like wildfire. And from that moment forward, it wasn't just his voice, they heard it was their own. People started speaking up not to tear others down, but to pull masks off the systems that kept them small, quiet, and manageable. Musicians posted about deals they'd decline. Creators revealed platforms that tried to silence their message. A groundswell was forming not against media, not against success, but against manipulated legacy. John Kennedy returned home that night and turned off every device in his house. He lit a fire, made tea, and sat in the stillness. He wasn't trending anymore. And for the first time, that didn't scare him. Because legacy isn't a headline, it's a choice. And in a world desperate to make people forget themselves, he made the loudest noise of all. He remembered who he was. If this story moved you, if it made you stop and think, if it made you wonder how many voices around you were almost silenced, share it. Comment below with the word truth if you believe legacy should be earned, not engineered. Because somewhere out there, someone else is standing in the dark, being asked to speak into the orb, and they need to know it's okay to walk away.